Hi everyone, welcome to the end of week market live stream thing. I'm David Jones, and what we'll do in the next half an hour, if you haven't attended one of these before, we'll take a look at what's been going on in major markets, indices, oil, gold, currencies, all the usual. And then we'll have a look at if there's any stuff you want looking at. If you put it in the chat, we'll take a look at it. I think it could be an interesting finish to the week. I've been watching this level. This is the S&P, the hourly chart. And the highs, if you remember from that day 2.5 weeks ago, when the US announced they were going to be pausing tariffs. And we had the massive move. Here we go. Where is it? From about, was it 6 o'clock UK time? So the second half of the session, market really ran higher. And since then, we've been trapped, really, in what's a wide sideways range. And it broke. So in the very last hour of last night's trade in the US, or yesterday's trade in the US, that level got broken. So I think it's interesting for today. Do we see a follow through from this breakout and the start of maybe a bigger recovery again for these US markets? Does it end up being a false breakout and we're going to see markets sell off, or does it end up being a bit flat? So I think it's interesting, because we have, as I say, been stuck in something of a range over the last couple of weeks or so. So I think that's an interesting one to watch. We'll take a look at gold as well a bit later. I mean, I'd be tempted to buy the dip on gold. It's getting a bit of a hammering in the current hour. But there were all-time highs on Tuesday, just up. I think it did actually touch $3,500, $3,500 an ounce, and it's come off since then. So we'll take a look at all of that as well. But before we do all of that, let's just do a risk warning. This presentation is only for educational purposes. It does not contain and should not be construed as containing investment advice or an investment recommendation or an offer of or solicitation for a transaction in any financial instrument. David Jones accepts no responsibility for any use that may be made of these comments and for any consequences that result. You should consider whether you understand how spread bets, CFDs, futures, foreign exchange work, and whether you can afford to take the high risk of losing your money. Trading is risky. Okay. Let's take a look at next week. It's quite a lot next week coming out, second half of the week. So from Wednesday, we've got EU GDP, so the quarterly update on the state of the Eurozone economy. I think that'll be interesting. Obviously, tariffs haven't bitten yet, but let's see what the EU economy looks like. We've got US personal consumer expenses data. That is an inflation number. I think inflation is still a theme, obviously. Interesting to see how inflation goes this year with all the tariffs. There we go. And then we've got US GD, which is my poor proofreading of US GDP. So we've got the US economic number as well out on Wednesday. So that's a busy day. Thursday, Japanese interest rate in the early hours of the morning for me in the UK. US ISM manufacturing data. And then on Friday, I haven't even put Friday in there. What was I thinking? Knocking all this together today. So Friday, we've got EU inflation. So again, what's inflation doing in the Eurozone? And US non-farm payrolls, US unemployment numbers, which is, I think all of this stuff has taken a bit of a back seat recently, hasn't it? Because of what's been going on with tariffs and everything else. But let's see. So that'll be next Friday. So as usual, I should be here next Friday at 2:30. So an hour after these US non-farm payrolls have come out. So we'll see what all that looks like. Okay. I should mention I run a WhatsApp group. I've been running it for 2.5 years now. I do a daily update, markets I'm looking at, trades I'm thinking of, trades I'm running, markets I'm watching, trades I'm running. I've done a few trades on the DAX this week. I'm in a trade actually from today on the DAX as well. I've done all right in the DAX this week. Just really buying the dip, buying into strength. We'll take a look at that as well. So I talk about that. Q&A, any trading questions you've got throughout the day, you can ask, and I do an update in the afternoon when US markets open. If you sign up using the code YouTube, you get 20% off the first month. It's £50 a month normally, so it's £40 for the first month. So you can try it for a month and see what you think. Most people stay in there for much longer than a month, but I'd say if you want to give it a go, those are the details. Well worth it, I think. It's, a couple of quid a day. And thoughts and strategies on markets. I run a trading course as well, and to find out who I trade with, go to the website. I'll go to the link bit.ly David /David Trade. All of these links are in the description to the video. And if you have any questions, feel free to send me an email. My email address is dj@davidjonestrading.co.uk. I don't have all the answers, but I've been doing this for a long time, so I can always give you an opinion. I think it's an interesting time, in trading, given the volatility we've had over the last, few weeks, couple of months now. I would guess that, it's a good time for brokers because, volatility means activity. Not a good time for clients, I'm hearing, on the whole. Not surprising. I think given the volatility we've got, it's been very much not a one-way bet in lots of markets. So I think people have been getting stopped out and margin called long and short. So I think it has been a very difficult time for a lot of people trading. So if you've had a bit of a tough time the last month or so, you're not alone on that one. I've traded less. I've had a good couple of weeks, mainly on the DAX. But when it comes to US markets, which is the stuff I normally trade, I've hardly done anything there because they've just been up one day, looks really bullish, and the next day bang down, and then up again the next day. Very sensitive to what comes out of the US government, obviously. So it's all been a little bit crazy. So, but yeah, so have a look at that. If you want to try the WhatsApp group, try that for a month. You get access to me, not 24/7, but 5 days a week, 12, 13 hours a day. And all the links are down below. Okay, let's have a look. Let's have a look at what's going on. So to go back to US markets, if you go have a look at the S&P, it's you can see, the last, for April really, isn't it? So the S&P ended March at 5,600, traded as low as 4,800. So what's that? An 800-point move. So 14% move, something like that. Has come all the way back up almost, and sort of flip-flopped around this these sort of post-tariff highs level. And I think that's the interesting thing from here. We saw the surge on the tariff pause, but there was no follow through the next day. Gave up almost half of the gains of the previous day back then, a couple of weeks ago, and then it's just been chopping around. But we have seen it break out. It's just got underway now in the US in the last 10 minutes or so. Is this going to be the start of a break higher? I don't know. If I was trading it now, if I wanted to be a buyer today, what would I do with my stop? At the moment, I suppose, what would an aggressive stop be? The sensible stop for me, if I was buying and trying to catch, thinking this is going to be a bigger breakout, would be underneath yesterday's low. Okay, so yesterday's low is 53.70. Obviously, we've got very volatile markets at the moment, so I'd need a wide stop. That would be one idea. And that would probably be it if I was trying to trade it. I don't think I'll do a trade today. Like I say, I'm in this DAX trade. We'll take a look at that a bit later. But interesting to see where these US markets finish the day. I think if it closes positive, what was yesterday's close? Yesterday's close was here. So we're just pushing through yesterday's close now. If it closes positive on the day, so let's say above 5,500 for the sake of argument, I think that's a positive end to the week, and it makes for an interesting week next week because it's taken out that level that was a hurdle. So so no rush for me to do anything today. Interesting to see where it finishes, but this for me is quite a big level, and we're breaking through at the moment. Let's see what the day looks like. Same on the Nasdaq. The Nasdaq, the high was there. So we're pretty much bang on it now on the Nasdaq. So again, for me, same thing. Let's see how it finishes. Here's the moves. This was a big move off that tariff pausing, and we've come back to it now 2.5 weeks later. Let's see what happens. So it's a wait and see for me at the moment in those markets. So that's it. DAX, the German market. It's been a good market for me over the last couple of weeks, but it's been a good trend as well. It's been a much, compare that. If we go back to the 7th of April, there's our DAX on the hourly. Looking at the same on the S&P, it's a lot scrappier, I'd say. Whereas the DAX, we have had this good trend, and basically I've just been buying the dips really. I bought the dip yesterday where there was it yesterday or Wednesday? What day was yesterday? Thursday? I can't remember. There was a gap open on Wednesday morning, The low on Wednesday was around 21.7. It came down to it, came down pretty much spot on again to that same low on Thursday. So I bought yesterday, came out overnight, and I bought again this morning. So I think the DAX is interesting. I think it's been a stronger market than the US markets. I would still be a buyer of the dip. So on the S&P, I'm definitely sit and wait on the S&P, but on the DAX, I'm a buyer of the dip. Because the trend is up, and here we are. Let's have a look on the dailies though. Let's take that line off because it looks a bit stupid on the dailies. Here we go. So the DAX, the all-time high for the DAX was only about 5 weeks ago, just below 23,500, and we're only 1,200 points away from that now. After a pretty brutal April, it's gained. What's it gained? 3,500 points since the low. 20% rally in the DAX, pretty much off the 7th of April lows. So it's a heck of a move there. Interesting move though. Interesting market. Blah blah blah. Let's see. I'll be a buyer of the dip on that one. The FTSE's had a good run. The UK market stalled a bit over the last couple of days. But again, if we go on the dailies for the FTSE, you get very sharp turnarounds. Obviously, in all these markets this month, I think it makes it difficult to trade. And of course, this is why people get clobbered a bit. And it's completely understandable when you have this sort of volatility. If you're trying to sell the rally, the market will push further than you thought it was going to push, and you get stopped out. If you're trying to buy the dip, some of the swings during the days, are pretty big. If we go back to that tariff day for the FTSE, it hit almost 82 in the out of hours, and the next day it was down below 7-8, so it moved 5%. So there are just big, crazy swings, but the FTSE's bouncing back well. Stalled a bit the last couple of days. Interesting to watch that one next week. The Aussie, what's that doing? Because I would have bought that at some point, but would have got stopped out. I mean, that's been a great trend off the COVID lows for the Aussie. This was the latest bit of the trend I was looking at, the Australian index. But that traded as low as almost 7.1 from 8.6, so a 20%, yeah, almost sell off in the Aussie index. Interesting, again, it all needs to calm down a bit for me. Some of these other markets, but let's see what it looks like. Hong Kong Hang Seng, I should have bought that again. I missed it. I've been such a doofus for this one, but the trend has been up since Jan 24, and the sell-off that we had, of course, across the board, but the lows from earlier in the year held. The market's bounced up. The trend for me, in the Hang Seng, is still up. I'd be a buyer of the dip. We've had a good rally off this early April weakness. So, blah, I'd buy the dip on that. Japan, I'm not that convinced that the Nikkei. The Nikkei, I did go short somewhere in here earlier on in the Nikkei. It has bounced back. Well, I'd be tempted to think, the Nikkei was sort of sliding before everything else went crazy. I'd still be tempted to think that the trend in the Nikkei is still down. So, yeah, I'm not really positive on that one, but maybe it's an interesting short if we get a bit more strength on that one. So for me, the better market to trade this week and last week has been the DAX because we've got a good trend. Interesting to see what happens with these US markets. Already they're getting a little bit flip-floppy, isn't it? That's yesterday's close, I think. Yeah, that's yesterday's close, this blue line. And it's a bit flip-floppy. So if you thought, well, actually, this is a false break up here, you can sell the rally. Oh, should we do that? Let's do a trade. I haven't done a trade for ages. I don't know if I've got enough money in this account to do a trade, but let's do a trade. What was the high? Let's have a look. Let's go short. Let's take the view it's a false break. The overnight high was 55.31. Can I do 56? 56 stop or 55.50? 55.75. Let's do 55.75 for a stop. 55.75. So I'm going to go short. I'm going to take the view. I don't know if I've got enough margin in this account. I'm going to take the view. Let's do 50 quid risk or something. 0.5. I'm going to take the view. It's a false break. Sell it. There you go. Done. Short. I mean, there's an old trade in here from a previous live stream on JD that did well, but there's my short on thingy on the S&P. So taking the view, this is a false break. Let's see how it turns out. Yeah, so I thought I'd do that because it makes the live stream a bit more interesting if we get some trades on. So yeah, so stock markets, good bounce back, still a bit mixed. Is this a proper break by the S&P and the Nasdaq? Let's see what it all looks like. Let's take a look at gold. So gold, let's just tidy things up a bit. I thought it was interesting on gold. If you look at weekly on gold, I was looking at this earlier the week. The move we've had on gold obviously has been really impressive. Just over a year ago, it was $2,000 an ounce, Feb 24, and it touched 3,500 this week. What's that? It's a 70% move, isn't it? 70% move. Wow, it is 70%, isn't it? Yeah, that's a big old move in gold. So the pace of this trend, has been sharper than the one we saw in the financial crisis at the end of the financial crisis, and we've got to go back to. There we go, back to here, sort of late 70s, very early 80s, to see that sort of rate of acceleration in the price of gold. So, I mean, it's always tempting to think, well, it's going to make a top soon, but I know, a lot of people have been the wrong side of this rally and have been clobbered because it has been so vicious. Who would have thought a year and a bit ago we'd see a 70% rise in the price of gold? But here we are. So I thought it was interesting from a historical perspective, just to put this rally into context, and we haven't seen the like for more than 40 years, I think. Anyway, if we flip over to the dailies and look back, so we had all-time highs on Tuesday. So again, a market that made all-time highs 3 days ago, I would want to be a buyer because I'm going to assume that the trend is still up. You could take the view, well, that's maybe the last bit of exuberance, but I would take the view, no, the trend is still up. So at the moment, gold could drop to, 2,900, 20% fall almost, and still be in that trend since the beginning of Feb, or the middle of Feb last year. So I think that's interesting. I'd like to be a buyer. I suppose if I was a buyer off the daily chart, the closest I'd have my stop is the previous high before the breakout. So the other side of 31.65, let's call it. I think a more conservative stop is down here, the other side of 29.50. So it's all interesting. I'd like to be a buyer. There's the hourly chart. There's the argument for having tighter stops, but I still quite like that 31.65 level. So if I was a buyer, should we do that trade as well? No, let's not go crazy trading. But I think that's an interesting market for next week to see if we see, the buyers come back in for gold. And where does it turn? So that's an interesting one. Silver, not so interesting, I don't think. Again, sort of doing its own thing, silver. Yes, we've had the rally in silver, but nowhere near to the extent that we've had in gold. It still hasn't got through the October 24 highs. So there's that. You can even go short, actually. There's the argument to go short, isn't there, silver? 35 almost was the high in October. It couldn't get through it in March. It's come back up again, and again, it's had a bit of a reversal today. So $35 still a barrier for the price of silver. The other market I think is interesting is oil. Again, to put things in historical perspective, where we are in oil. Earlier this month, it traded as low as $55 a barrel, which puts it back. Be sort of to here, Feb 21 levels. So 4-year lows on oil we saw earlier this month. This was the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So it more than halved off that level from March 2022. And absolutely, you would argue the big trend in oil over the last few years is still down, I would say. So there's that to bear in mind, which looks something like that, I guess. So the big trend is still down, but it has had a little bounce back over the last, how long has it been? The last couple of weeks. And again, it's that tariff pause move. Fell out of the trend earlier this week, but I put it in the WhatsApp group the last couple of days. I'd still be a buyer, and I'd probably at the moment, I should have bought it a bit earlier this morning, but I'd probably at the moment, want to stop the other side of these lows from a week last Wednesday. So the other side of $60.30 on my chart, just to see, does the recovery continue? And I think if it falls through those lows, it looks like the recovery has stalled again. So, but an interesting market. Oil, I think that's been interesting. Natural gas. Let's have a look at that. Funny old market. That's heating oil. Wrong market. Natural gas. I do hate this market. I don't trade it very often, but I'm expecting the bounce in natural gas. But again, it's all been a bit lunatic. You know, it hit a multi-year high in March at 4.94, and here we are at 2.93 or thereabouts. You know, so it's lost $2 in about 6 weeks. So what's that? About 30 odd percent, 35%, something like that. So let's see what happens with natural gas next week. This 287, 285 level had been support on the way up. Let's see if it turns out that way on the way back down again. So yeah, so I do look at natural gas, but I mean, it's been a good trend down, but it does, you know, it has good trends like the one that hit all-time highs, or not all-time, multi-year highs. Then absolutely reverses and just doesn't even pause. Anyway, so that's that. That's natural gas. Oh, let's do Bitcoin. Bitcoin has sort of weathered all of this, you know, tariff stuff and global uncertainty really well the last few weeks. The big trend in Bitcoin is still up from wherever we take it from. I've taken it from October 23. The trend line is at 70k. You know, it traded down to about 74. It's had a strong bounce back. Interesting to see from here. Does it break out again? I think perhaps not yet, but who knows? But if we had a sell-off, interesting to see if it holds above 74 again. So I'll be a buyer of the dip. The big trend is up. That's it really for Bitcoin. You know, and it hasn't you know fallen off a cliff in this the turmoil we've seen. Obviously, you'd be better off in gold than Bitcoin over the last couple of months. But yeah, interesting to see how it has survived. And let's have a look at some currencies. There's an interesting trade, I think, on the dollar index. So the dollar index is the dollar against a basket of other currencies. So perhaps the longer term trade here, like the rest of the year trade, the dollar index traded up to 110 in Jan. All right. So it where did it get to? So just above 110. And then it traded down to 98 because of all the tariff stuff. So what's that? A 112-point move in the dollar index. So it's a 10% slide the dollar index has had. I've had this line on my chart because it was the lows from July 23. You know, and it's a really, really important level. This low, whatever it was, 99.50, let's call it. The dollar has fallen through this low, but we haven't really seen like a pronounced sell-off. So you could make the argument, because always in markets, there's two ways, isn't it? You can be a buyer or a seller, can't you? You know, and you can make an argument for both, usually. So the argument for being a seller of the US dollar, the trend is down. Yeah, the trend has been down for much of this year. And here we are. We had a little bounce off the lows, but the market's going to turn lower again. Absolutely sensible trade that, looking to sell the rallies. The argument for being a buyer is that this was a false break, that the dollar overshot to the downside, and we're going to see a dollar recovery as the year goes on. No, nobody knows, of course. But if I was doing that trade, I would put a stop under that April low. So if I was a buyer now at 99.70, the low is 97.90, so I could have a 200 odd point stop and sit with it and see if we get a dollar recovery. Of course, for me, if it breaks that low that we've seen so far this year, then it doesn't look like a false break anymore. You know, so interesting to see what happens with the US dollar. And of course, you know, what happens with the US dollar, when we have a weaker US dollar, it helps the price of gold, obviously. We've got the likes of pound against the dollar, touched pretty much the highs from last year, up at 134. Euro actually hit a multi-year high, euro against the dollar. So, you know, that's another interesting market that has held up this week above an old support. So, yeah, interesting. I mean, I'm not really sure on the dollar. I do quite like the idea of that false break trade. So, yeah, let's see what happens. So that's it. What we'll do now, if there's any questions, any stuff you want looking at, put it in the chat and we'll have a look at that. But for me, you know, I don't think I'll do much today. I'm long the DAX anyway from this morning. What's that doing? Where is that? This is just sort of a bit flip-floppy. Yeah, so I bought, when did I buy? About down here somewhere, 22,170. So that's slightly ahead. We did that short S&P trade. Oh, that's making a little bit of money. That's quite handy. Okay, so I made a fiver on the live stream. Excellent. So I think I'm not in a hurry to do anything else though, but I think it will be interesting to see what happens the rest of the day in the US. Do we see a sustained move through these highs from earlier in the month, or does the market dump from here? Let's see. So that's interesting going into next week. Gold is interesting for me going into next week because it's all-time highs this week. So for me, it's a market that's still strong. The only question is how far does the sell-off go from here? But I think there's some interesting ideas for trades there. And oil, is it going to resume the uptrend it's been in? So I'd say yes. I'd be a buyer. Like I say, I should have bought this morning, but with a stop in the side of 60. Interesting to see, do we have a run back up to 65 next week? So lots to watch. I've got my DAX trade on. I'm not in a hurry to do anything else today. So we'll see what the rest of the day brings. Quick plug, of course, join the WhatsApp group. See how that goes for you. I think you will, even if you don't stay in for a year, I think you'll still find it value for money. And it's my take on markets every day and updates throughout the day. So use the code YouTube to get 20% off the first month. To see who I trade with, I place the trade now, of course, and I like it because you can trade small. It integrates with Trading View, and it's just tight spreads and it's nice and easy. And I've been using them for a few years now. Go to bit.ly/David Trade. And if you have any questions, drop me an email, dj@davidjonestrading.co.uk. Like I say, I don't have all the answers, but I definitely have an opinion. Let's have a quick look at Tesla, actually. Like I say, if you've got any questions, fire them in. But Tesla, what's that doing these days? I mean, I think there's an argument for being a buyer of Tesla. Let's just get rid of some of this. I mean, it's back to, US pre-election levels. Obviously had a massive bump off the election. Went from 250 to 490. So nearly doubled the Tesla stock price after the US election. And it sort of bumped back down to where it was before then. So I think it is interesting. It's a different... if you take all the politics out of it, it's a different environment for Tesla now than they've enjoyed over the years because there are so many other competitors in the EV space, isn't it? And I saw one that was launched today. Apparently it's like a $20,000, $25,000 car. I think, is it backed by... Because I saw someone calling it Jeff Bezos' car, but basically it's this, so it's there you go, it's like a 25 grand, it's pretty cool, I think, 25 grand little truck. Lots of competition for Tesla now, and of course the Chinese companies as well. So interesting to see how all that goes. But, looking at the trend on Tesla, this is back to 2020. Look at that. So we are still in that trend. Let's see what happens next for Tesla. But let's have a look at some of the questions. You often mention the previous day's high and low as reference points. What role does it play in your trading? Good question, Kevin. It plays for short-term trading. Plays a very big role. So if I look at that DAX trade, for example, so I bought the DAX this morning. And why did I buy the DAX this morning? Let's fast forward back to yesterday. That was yesterday on the DAX. So yesterday's high on the DAX was about here. Let's call it just a 22.1, right? So if we walk through, so I didn't look at the DAX till about 10 o'clock this morning, something like that. But here we go. Yeah, so it was about here I bought, and it was a bit of a spike move higher. But it did, it was already, the DAX this morning was trading above yesterday's high. Yesterday's high was obviously the highest it got yesterday, and the sellers came in. They thought it's too expensive up here. Today it's traded through that high. So for me, right, the trend is up. I want to be a buyer. So at the most basic level, using yesterday's high as a reference for which way the trend is, and also then thinking about stops. Look at it. It's actually, that was pretty textbook. That wasn't the reason I did the trade, but it sold off. It's come back to yesterday's high, the DAX, and it held. So for me, all right, the trend, it still looks strong. So there's a couple of ways I'll use previous day's highs and lows. So that has worked quite well for me. I had a wider stop than that though. But so I'm in the trade. I bought at 22,170, whatever it was. So I bought the sell-off. So for me, if you think about it, with markets, no one knows where markets are going to go. the only data we have is historical data. So if I'm looking to do a trade today, particularly a short-term trade, then yesterday's high and low is an important one for me. If you look at gold, I mean, it's already taken out yesterday's low. Gold. What was yesterday's low there? Is it there? Maybe a bit earlier. Yeah, it was there. Yesterday's low. So gold has taken out yesterday's low. So I want to be a buyer of gold, but maybe I don't want to buy it today. Yeah, because if it's through yesterday's low, maybe it's a bit weak. But then you could also use the argument, well, we're holding above Wednesday's low though. So if I want to be a buyer, so far it has held above Wednesday's low. So if I want a really aggressive stop, maybe I go the side of Wednesday's low. But I'd actually want it wider than that. So I hope that gives, I think for me it helps paint a bit of a picture as to is the strength from early in the week carrying on. Could you have a look at 3i Group on the LSE? Triple I is the ticker. Yeah, that's done well, hasn't it? I think recently or historically. Yeah. Oh, look at that! What a trend! What a cracking trend! I would be a buyer on that. The only question is, where would I buy, and where would my stop go, and all the usual guff. It's interesting though, isn't it? That's the big trend going from October 22. And the sell-off, perfect buying opportunity. The sell-off didn't take out that trend, and here we are, all-time highs for Triple I. So I'd be a buyer. The only question is, where would my stop go? I'd rather buy the dip for longer-term stuff. I'm always happier buying a dip. The risk means that I miss out if the market doesn't dip. But yeah, what a lovely trend that is. So yeah, if it dipped back, definitely an interesting one for me. The Spanish and Polish markets are trending well. Yeah, the Spain, I did trade the Spanish market. Good trend in the Spain 35 index, I think it is. I did trade that a bit before. Oh, look at that. The Spanish market, has almost come back all the way to where it was before it fell off the cliff. So even stronger than the Germans. That's a great trend, the Spanish one. I should have been trading that rather than the DAX. Yeah, but it's another interesting one, isn't it, next week? Does the Spanish market take out the old highs, which are only 160 points away from where it is now? And we see all-time highs for the Spanish market. Yeah, great trend. AJG, is that? I know that. AJG, Arthur Gallagher. I traded that last year. Good trend in that one. There was last year. Look at that, lovely. US stock. I don't know today. What would you do today? I would be tempted to buy the dip because absolutely I would make the argument that the trend is still up. If you could click like while I remember, if you do like, if you don't like it, obviously don't do anything. I keep forgetting to do all that YouTube stuff and trying to help the algorithm. I would buy a dip. I think it's maybe an interesting one for me next week, that one. Where would your stop go? The closest I'd want my stop is the low we've had through all this nonsense in April, the other side of $300. I'd probably rather have it down below $275. But that's, the trend is up, blah, blah, blah. I'd be a buyer. The only question is, when do I buy? And that's Arthur J. Gallagher. Cotton looks like it started a new uptrend. Do you know, I'd be short cotton thinking about it, or I would have been. But let's have a look. No, I don't. For me, this is why, it takes two sides to make a market. I'd be tempted to think, is that a false break in cotton? You could absolutely make the argument it's breaking out of the downtrend in cotton. But cotton's been going down for so long, since 2022. So we're 3 years into that trend. I'd still be tempted to be a seller, but I can absolutely see why someone would say, I want to be a buyer because it's breaking out. Interesting one. That's an interesting one, cotton. So I'd be tempted to sell short, and I would want my stop. I'd probably want my stop above 70 and a bit at the moment. Interesting market though. Let's come back to it over the next couple of weeks and see what happens. But I'd be thinking, well, we've had so many failed breakouts or failed rallies in cotton. Is this time any different? Let's see what happens. But interesting one there. Can you have a look at Arabica coffee? Yeah, coffee. Oh, where is it? Coffee. Which one's Arabica and which one's the other one? Robusta. Okay, Arabica. It's interesting, isn't it? That big trend is still up, Kev, isn't it? As it has been up for ages. There we go. Back to September 23. Big trend still up. It's having a right run this week. Is it going to break the all-time highs? What would you do? As usual, I'd be waiting. if I had to buy it today, where would I buy it today? Where would I put my stop? That's the difficult thing, isn't it? I mean, an aggressive stop is the other side of 400, isn't it? Which is the low for today. That would be an aggressive stop. If I thought coffee was going to continue and rocket next week, that's where my stop would be. In reality, I'd be sitting on the fence to wait and see, does it break through these old highs? And you could even make the argument for going short, of course, but I wouldn't go short at the moment because the trend is so strong. But yeah, a great run higher. I'd be more comfortable with a stop under Thursday's low, which is about 387. But yeah, 400 is the low for today. Interesting to see how that all resolves itself over the next few weeks or so. So it hit the all-time high in Feb, so it's been a couple of months since the all-time high. Let's see what happens next. SES for the penny slot players. Let's have a look. SES, what's that? SES AI Corporation. Oh my God. AI, I mean, it is nuts, isn't it? AI. Is AI going to be the new blockchain? And it's, flavour of the moment and it all fades away a bit? I don't know. I don't understand it. I'm an old bloke. What do I know? Yeah, but what would you do? I mean, it's 118 now. It was 40 cents at the beginning of the month. Yeah, absolutely. Like you say, slot machine. That one. I have no idea where I put a stop on that. What do you think of Tesla? We did Tesla, didn't we? Yeah. Intel. Where's Intel? Now, Intel, from memory, this had been weak. Before we look at the chart, test my chart memory. It'd been weak and it just banging around in a sideways range. So I would have been a seller looking at Intel in the past. Has it changed? No, is a quick answer to that one. So we're still banging around, isn't it? Trend is down on Intel since, well, actually, if we're going to go all the way back, we go all the way back to Feb 2020, $67. So I would say the trend is still down. I think when we've looked at this in the past, I said I'd been a seller on a rally, and it'd still be the same for me. I suppose it's interesting that even though US markets are having a better time, Intel isn't, is it? Did it have earnings? It must have had earnings. There we go. So it's gapped lower on earnings. Yeah, it's just. I'd rather, if I had to do anything, I'd sell a rally. You could make the argument for being a buyer in the really short term. I wouldn't do it because the trend is still down. But yeah, it's just a bit uninspiring, isn't it? The old Intel. Let's see what is moving. Hold on a second. I'm just going to have a quick look at the Nasdaq 100 and see what the top performers have been, or today, what the top performer is today. Let's have a quick look. See what the movers and shakers are. What's the biggest mover today? Percentage. Oh, hang on. Let's do 20 days. 20-day best performer, Palantir, whatever it is. Oh, I can't even spell it. Palantir Technologies up 20% over the last 20 days. Look at that. The trend continues. Second best, CrowdStrike. Oh, what is wrong with my typing? Oh, come on. CrowdStrike, second best performer. Yeah, all right. Anything? Netflix has been a good one. What does that look like? They had earnings, didn't they? Oh, all-time highs on Netflix. Buy. Interesting, isn't it? So that, yeah, I'd be a buyer of that. Again, the only question is, where did my stop go? I'd wait to see if there's a pullback. Let's have a look at the worst performers over the last 20 days. Warner Bros. Down 22%. Oh, that's quite interesting though. There's maybe the argument, if you thought the down move was overdone, I could be a buyer of that really. If you thought the down move, the sell-off was overdone. God, they've done terrible, haven't they, historically? Where did they go? March 2021, $77 a share. Today, $8. Who'd have thought that? That a big household name like Warner Brothers would have dropped almost 90%. And Lululemon, another bad performer. Again, there's the argument for being a bit of a bottom fisher there as well. Pardon the pun. Yoga pants. Really inappropriate. I'll edit that out. 226 with the lows last time round in August. Interesting to see if it gets a rally off it. Anyway, blah. There we go. US oil. We looked at US oil, crude oil. I think you're talking about crude oil, aren't you? US oil is crude oil. Yeah. I mean, I'd be a buyer of crude oil at the moment with a stop below, I don't know, a $3 stop or something like that, a bit further than that, to see if the recovery continues. But, just bear in mind the big trend is down. Sterling yen. I mean, I was in this trade for ages and I tightened my stop up. And I came out of it. I mean, it was a buy sort of back here, wasn't it? I mean, on the hourlies, would you buy it on the hourlies? Yeah. I mean, the trend has been up for the last few days, isn't it? So if I was a buyer, the closest I'd have my stop is the other side of 190 at the moment on sterling yen. But I was in that trade for a long time. I just got bored of it. But it looks strong at the moment. Euro dollar. We did look at euro dollar. I mean, I'd be a buyer of euro dollar. But again, of course, it's all very much dollar dependent, isn't it? If we see a big comeback for the dollar, does it all change? I don't know. And Google. This is another. I was in this last year for a bit last year. This did well. Oh, that's interesting, isn't it? That's cut. So that came right off. So all-time highs in Feb, 205, traded down to 140. So a 30% slide. So we've had earnings. Kevin says we've had earnings. So blah, blah, blah. I would probably still, I don't know. The big trend, is the big trend still up? Maybe, yeah. I'd be tempted to be a seller at the moment. In reality, I'd probably sit on my hands. But we have had, you could argue the trend is still sort of down with a stop above 171 or something. Interesting to see how that finishes. So yeah, there we go. That's it. So lots to watch. How's my little DAX trade doing? That's doing all right. And lots to watch next week. Gold, I think, is interesting. Where does it all stop? Let's see. I think 31.65 is where I would have my stop beyond. We will wrap things up there. But if you like what you see, join the WhatsApp group. Yeah, try it out. See what you think. To see who I trade with, go to bit.ly/David Trade. I run trading courses as well. It's all on the website. My website is well overdue a refresh, but I'm completely useless at stuff like that. So, but yeah, have a look there. I'll come back next Friday. Payroll's next Friday. Interesting to see how it all is then. Really interesting. It's been a bit of a draining few weeks, I think, with the nuts we've seen in markets. But let's see if we do get a break for US markets today. Does it hold above those highs from the tariff pause day? That's it. Okay, so in the meantime, good luck with your trading. Any questions, drop me an email and we'll do it all next week.